So I live in the town right next to Wellesley, and even today you can still find the Wellesley Fudge Cake on menus around town.
And I love recipes like this, where you do a little bit of digging out there, you do a little bit of research, and you find older recipes that really need to be brought back and spotlighted.
Plus it feels a little rebellious, and that's fun.
We're such rebels.
Rebel cake.
Rebel cake, yes, that's what we should call it. Now, one of the things when you look for recipes is you find ingredients that maybe aren't as prevalent today. And the first one that we found was thick soured milk.
Gesundheit. I've never heard of it.
Well, they had to do something with milk that went off really quickly, and it was called soured milk. Well, today we have buttermilk. This is a very soft cake, and the acid in the buttermilk is going to help with that texture.
Makes sense.
Right. Now, another ingredient that we looked at and we changed was pastry flour. Now, that's still around today, but it's a very low gluten flour. It doesn't give it a lot of structure. One of the problems that we had with this cake was frosting it.
Right.
It's a fudge frosting, so it would tear the cakes. So this is 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. We're gonna mix together our dry ingredients. We're using 2 leaveners here. This is 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and then 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and this is going to react with the acidic buttermilk to help provide lift. This is a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Mix this together. Standard operating procedure so far. Let's get to the chocolate. This is a 1/2 cup of Dutch processed cocoa. Now we want to draw out its flavor, so we're going to bloom it with 3/4 cup of hot water.
And that's a good idea to do it whenever you're working with cocoa. Bloom it in hot water and you'll get more flavor out of it.
We're also going to mix in a little bit of vanilla here. This is 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and I'll stir this with my whisk until the cocoa is dissolved. Let's get mixing here.
Okay.
We're going to start with creaming the butter and sugar. This is 2 sticks or 16 tablespoons of unsalted butter. We've softened it just a little bit. We're going to mix in 2 cups of granulated sugar. This is an old-fashioned recipe. It's supposed to be on the sweeter side. Start it on low and then move it on up to medium-high until it gets fluffy and creamy. That's going to take about 3 minutes. Fluffy butter and sugar, can't get much better than that.
And this is a really important step when making a cake. You don't want to skimp on the time or else you'll ruin the texture of the cake.
And now we're going to work in 2 eggs. I'm going to add them 1 at a time on off. There we go. We start it on low and then work it back up to medium-high just to incorporate. All right, that one's mostly worked in. Let's get the other one in there. All right, that looks good. So now we're going to start adding the flour in 3 additions and the buttermilk in 2. Don't want to dump it all in there. You end up with big pockets of unmixed flour.
And lumps.
And lumps. It's Armageddon. So I'm going to start with the mixer off with about 1/3 of this flour mixture. Let's start this on low just until it's incorporated in. All right, that looks good. It's just mixed in. I'm going to add 1/2 of the buttermilk, and that would be a 1/2 cup. Mix this on low just until incorporated. All right, 1/2 of the remaining flour.
And you're being very careful not to overwork that batter.
Yes, you don't want to deflate it too much. We don't want to activate the gluten in the flour too much. So now the remaining buttermilk and this final addition of flour. And now I just want to get it till it's all brought together. And that's about it. I do want to scrape down the sides of that bowl, and then we're going to add the cocoa gradually, and then we'll mix it until it's combined. That's only going to take about a minute. That is coming together nicely. All right, and I like to give it a final stir, really just to make sure that any of those hidden pockets that sometimes live on the bottom.
The divot on the bottom always catches a little batter.
All right, so now let's go ahead and portion this into our pans, which are not circular.
They are not round.
And as you know, Wellesley Fudge Cake is made in square pans. It's traditional. These are 8-inch square pans that we've gone ahead and greased with a little bit of the vegetable oil cooking spray that has flour in it. But if you don't have that, you can grease it and then flour the pans. That will work out fine. A little final wrap.
That's just to get any air bubbles out from underneath the bottom of the batter.
Exactly. So these are going to bake at 350, and I'm going to keep them in there for about a 1/2 hour, but what I'm going to look for is a toothpick inserted in the center of the cakes. Comes out clean. All right. Smells amazing.
It sure does.
All right. 1 cake, 2. All right, let's check these for doneness. Take my toothpick, stick it right in the center, and a few crumbs should stick to that toothpick, and that looks great. These have to cool in their pans completely. That's gonna take at least an hour. If you wanna be sure, leave more time, but you can actually make these a couple days in advance if you want to. They're pretty moist, and they will stay nice and fresh.
Ooh.
Okay, so let's move on down to the frosting.
Fudge frosting.
Fudge frosting, and we're making real fudge frosting. Fudge making with evaporated milk became popular in the 1950s for a good reason, because it doesn't split. It's already been processed and heated. A lot of the liquid is already gone, so we don't have to cook it as long. So this is a half a cup of evaporated milk, 1.5 cups of light brown sugar. Now it's already a little bit moist, so it's not going to crystallize the way granulated sugar can. And also it's going to give a deeper flavor to our frosting.
Almost butterscotchy.
Almost butterscotchy. This is 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter and a little bit of salt, a half a teaspoon. Now we're gonna cook this over medium. There we go. I'm gonna keep an eye on it and stir it. The magic temperature for this is going to be between 235 to 238. Now it's been about 4 or 5 minutes and you can see that beautiful color. But I do wanna check the temp because again, we're looking for around 235 up to 238 will be great. Anything within there is gonna give us exactly what we need in terms of temp. 236. So now we want to stop that cooking as soon as possible. So I'll transfer it to a stand mixer.
So this cold bowl will help cool down the mixture.
That's right, but you don't want to chill a glass bowl and then pour it into there. So just room temperature bowl is perfect. We're going to chill it down even more with 4 tablespoons more of our unsalted butter and another half cup of evaporated milk. So let's move this over to our stand mixer. We're going to let this go on low for about 30 seconds until the butter and the milk is fully incorporated. Let's turn that off. Now we're gonna let it cool down for about 10, maybe 15 minutes. We're looking for a temperature around 130. All right, it's been about 15 minutes. I'm gonna check the temp because we cannot move on until it's 130. That's good. All right, good, because again, if it was too hot, the chocolate would start to separate. Speaking of, let me tilt this up. We're gonna add our chocolate, and this is 8 ounces of bittersweet chocolate that we've chopped. It's real, I've tasted it. That goes in. A little vanilla, it's a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And now we're gonna mix this on low, just until the chocolate is fully melted. It's gonna take about a minute. So that is looking beautiful, all mixed in. All right, so now we wanna turn this into a frosting. And this is 3 cups of confectioner's sugar, good old 10X as we call it. Goes right in there.
All at once.
All at once. You see why I didn't add it while it was attached to the machine. I still managed, I think, to get some.
Minimal amount on the counter.
Oh, good, good. All right, so we're gonna mix this on low for about 3 minutes, and we want all of that sugar to be incorporated in, so I'll probably have to scrape down the bowl a couple of times. But once all the sugar's mixed in there, we're gonna let this cool down even more. So we're gonna wait until it's 80 degrees. That's gonna take a good hour. All right, Julia, now after an hour, take a look at what the frosting looks like.
Wow, it really got a crust on top.
It did, you could touch it, it's okay.
It's hard.
It's real fudge.
Yeah.
You could actually have poured this into a pan, cut it into squares, and given it to me for Christmas. But we're gonna turn this into a frosting. So let me affix the beater back on, now over medium-high for just a minute until it's aerated and it comes back together. Julia, that looks whippy enough. It went from fudge to frosting. So you remember those cakes, right? Going to frost it right on this pedestal. I want to protect it. Have these little parchment strips.
Yeah, this is a really great tip to help keep your cake platter clean.
All right, so now I do want to scoop out a cup of this frosting to put right on that first layer. Let's scoop it right in the middle. And I'll start working this to the sides of the cake. Ooh.
That frosting looks nice to work with.
It's beautiful. You want to give it a swirl?
No, I'm enjoying watching you do it.
All right. Yeah, this is my zen. You know, some people have yoga. I frost cakes. Now, we don't need this to be too neat, but we want it to be even. Second layer goes on top, and I'm going to take this top part and flip it down so that this nice flat top is right on top of our cake, and that's what we're going to see. All right, so I like to start, plop a whole bunch on there.
So you start on the top of the cake.
I do. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to finish on the top too, I will, but I always like to make sure, this is what everybody sees. So I like to make sure that I've allotted enough for the top. Now that I have the top mostly covered, I'm gonna start slapping some on the sides there. I'm gonna start taking that frosting out just a little bit more. See how I let it go over the edge just a little bit. So now as it falls, I'm just catching it right on the corners, just like that. And with each pass of a corner, it gets a little bit more covered. Now here's that big blurb of chocolate frosting. There we go. Now it's fully loaded with frosting. We're gonna do a nice design right on the top, just a little swirly back and forth. So I'm gonna continue to work on this a little bit more, and then we do wanna refrigerate it for at least an hour to make sure that fudge frosting is good and set. Hard work pays off.
I like we got the square cake, you have the square cake platter, and I have square plates at the ready.
Because we're a couple of squares. Well, this is what an hour in the fridge does. You can actually touch it.
Oh, that's some good fudge right there.
It's fudge, but frosted.
I love it.
So I'm going to take a long slicing knife and go right halfway through. And now we start slicing this way because you get all these little ridges right across. There we go. Look at that.
Look at that. I love it. It tastes like an old-fashioned chocolate cake. And you can taste some of that brown sugar, a little bit of caramel notes in there.
That cocoa-y chocolate. There's some smart ladies there at Wellesley College.
So if you want to make a chocolate contraband cake, start by blooming cocoa in hot water. For the cake, use a standard mixing method where you cream butter and sugar, then add the eggs, then finally the dry and wet ingredients in alternating batches. Bake the cake in square pans, and while they cool, make a foolproof fudge frosting and whip it just before serving. From Cook's Country, it's no longer a secret, Wellesley Fudge Cake.
I'd go back to school for 8 years if they served this.
Thanks for watching Cook's Country from America's Test Kitchen. So what'd you think?
Leave a comment and let us know which recipes you're excited to make, or just say hi.
Now you can find links to today's recipes and reviews in the video description.
And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
See you later.
Alligator.